Hey class, and welcome to another great week in PC 101. We're going into lesson 11 here, so we're cruising right along. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel, it's getting closer. But now is not the time to let up. As you've probably noticed over the last few weeks here, the coursework is getting a little more intense. There's more writing, the math is harder. We continue with our life skills development, so now's not the time to let up. So keep going strong, you're getting there. Not quite time to celebrate the semester's over yet though. You know, that's one thing that's important as you're throughout school. Just because it's getting close and you've done a lot, and you know, sometimes even if you're doing real well in the class, then it's like, oh, you know, I'm okay. Don't think that way, okay? There's a lot of assignments still coming, some of them pretty heavily weighted, so just keep doing what you're doing and keep doing great. So this week, in our life skills portion, we are going to continue with our discussion about thinking errors, and in fact our application activity focuses around the thinking errors. Application activity is the assignment that you always submit at the end of the week on Saturday. What you're going to do is, throughout a day, anytime you commit a thinking error, you're going to write that down. You're going to write what time of day it was, what happened, and what the goal of this is it hopefully kind of triggers you to notice it, for one, and then also how can you prevent it from happening. And maybe you'll notice a pattern like, oh man, you know, I always seem to get, at least I do, have these thinking errors when it's around time to eat. Maybe it's because I'm hungry, and you know, when I get in that hangry stage, as some people call it, you know, you start thinking differently, right? So that's the goal of the activity. Figure out maybe what's causing some of these thinking errors. From there, in our writing this week, we are going to be talking about counter arguments, right? So that's when somebody from the opposing side would say, well, what about this, right? And you've got to figure out a way to counter that, right? You got to how to prove them wrong. And counter arguments are really good when in writing, because one thing that I always feel like a good counter argument does is it shows, when you're writing a persuasive essay, it shows that you have researched the other side's viewpoint, right? If I'm sitting there trying to teach you something or convince you of something, and I don't even know anything about what the opposing side is saying, then that kind of makes my argument a little bit weak, right? Because it can be viewed as, well, he's partial, or it's only one-sided, right? You want to be able to show that contrast of, you know, this is what I'm saying, this is what the other people are saying, and then being able to point out why that's inaccurate, right? Or why you believe that's inaccurate. Depending on the subject you're writing on, if it's a controversial subject, I'm not a politician or really into politics, but you can, you know, just watch the news, right? And you can see in politics, you know, there's one group's viewpoint, another group's viewpoint, how much back and forth they both think they're right, you know, and so there's some subject matters that just are very opinionated and how people think. And then, you know, as you get into like more scientific stuff, you know, maybe there's not as much. But one thing that is interesting, even in sciences, you can still have counter arguments. There's plenty of times throughout history where a thought process on a certain scientific, you know, a scientific discovery had been proven wrong, or something that they thought wasn't possible was proven wrong. I remember when I was in grad school, that was one of those things that was kind of interesting to me, is that as I read these scientific journals, and as I wrote my own journal articles and my thesis, I had to like argue against maybe what somebody else had wrote. You know, I read their papers and I said, you know, oh, they pointed out this, but I don't think that's right because of this, this, and this, right? So counter arguments are huge. They help build, they kind of, I don't know, they build your persuasive essay in a way that shows that you're not maybe so one-minded, that you've thought of other things as well, and that makes it even more so like, oh, this person, they've researched, they've looked at this and they looked at that, and now this is what they've concluded. I believe this person, you know. That's what you're hoping for when you're writing a persuasive essay. Your goal should always be to persuade them. So anyways, that's this week. We're talking about counter arguments in our writing. Now on to the math portion. Today, or this week, we will be solving variables. That's right, we're getting into some algebra, okay? And don't let that scare you. I know that a lot of people sometimes struggle in this portion, and that's okay. Math is not easy. I'm not going to claim that it's easy, okay? And so what that does mean, though, is don't be afraid to reach out for help if you're struggling. you can reach out to me. You can reach out to a tutor. You can reach out to fellow classmates at your gathering. Each semester I've taught math, there always seems to be somebody, my students are like, well, there's so-and-so in my gathering, he's really good at math, right? There always seems to be that person out there that's good at math. And hopefully you can use them as a resource, not a crutch, right? You don't want people to be doing your work for you, but maybe you can learn from them, and maybe they can explain it in a way that will help you. So as we solve for variables, one important thing, and I think I mentioned this in previous weeks, I don't remember exactly which week, but order of operations. I mentioned the acronym PEMDAS, right? You'll remember that from a few weeks back. But order of operations sometimes is the hardest thing. Sometimes it's not even solving for that x, right? Like, you'll solve for x, you'll get a number, and you're like, oh, I did it. And then you'll go check your answer, or you'll be on a quiz or something, and you'll get it wrong. And it's like, oh, how did I get it wrong? Well, I'll tell you, I'll bet, if I had to put a guess on it, 9 times out of 10, maybe it was order of operations. Okay, maybe we, subtracted and added before we divided, or just maybe we didn't break down parentheses properly, things like that. So really, really pay attention to that as you work on your math this week. So, other than that, that's all I have for you. I think this is coming in at a record of being short. Usually they're like 10 minutes. I'm looking like 6 minutes 30 seconds. Or better stop talking. Have a great week. As always, reach out to me if you need any help, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.